And we're gonna do a quick little segment.
How are you guys doing?
Good. It's good to see you. I'm so sorry about your Ravens. I know you were just had to hear that.
No, it was very astute. I agree with everything, but I'm still in recovery. So
Yes, we all are. That's why it's Misery Monday
yeah,
here in the DMV.
for sure.
It's rough, and I hope that the Caps can fare better against Pittsburgh than the Ravens
Yeah,
did. And
new beginnings.
Robbie, we have a hype train, sir.
yeah, I know. I want to thank everybody for gifting subs. Tina French has gifted out a bunch of subs. Andrea Canada's sister, she gifted one too. Got one to Davey. The E Flat guy resubscribed for 13 months, talking about 13s. Then we have an anonymous gifter. I think it's the first time a Ghosty has ever appeared on my channel. And gave a gift sub as well. So we're at 12 out of 20. If we hit 20 subs this month, I'm going to redo the Charizard into an HD Charizard with a lot more fancy animations. I'm going to redo the sports one that has all the different sports that go across with a lot fancier animations and different sports going across and team logos, and really redo that one. And then I'm also going to redo the Mew one with the hearts and stuff like that into a really cool fancy new one as well. So our 3 favorite animated emotes I will redo whenever that 20 subs is unlocked. You'll get a new animated emote each week I'll make, and then whenever Twitch allows for them to appear, they'll come. So I just wanted to let people know about the hype train and all of that, but I really appreciate all the hype that everyone has given already. Arun has entered chat. He says, let's go Orioles. Arun, if you want to come on in as well, I see that you are in chat, both and on our Zoom feed as well. So you can
jump find the dog first.
This is right. There you go.
Gotta hydrate, gentlemen. Gotta hydrate.
Right. Oh yeah, so to hydrate. I appreciate that. All right, so Tim, I'm gonna let you quickly give your thoughts on the Ravens game. I'm gonna refresh my drink real fast, but hold on, let me turn on I have a brand new Ravens graphic that will appear now.
Oh, sweet.
And yeah, so give your quick thoughts on that. Thank you for finishing level 1. I'm going to refill my water. I'll be right back. But Tim, give your quick thoughts on the Ravens game, and then I'm going to get Champ's thoughts on it as well.
Yeah, it was definitely a very frustrating loss. I felt like this game was more the Ravens beating the Ravens than the Steelers beating the Ravens. And it was just there were so many drops, so many mistakes. Like Robbie said, not kicking a field goal at the end of the first half was just idiotic. It just seemed like they were trying to be too cute. They dominated the first half and were still winning by 7, but you just got to take the 3 points there. You don't need 7. It would be nice, but it's not worth the risk. And there's clearly something with this rivalry where at the moment, the past 3 years, the Steelers have mostly dominated it and I think gone 5-1. So right now there's definitely a mental edge on Pittsburgh's side. They haven't had the greatest run lately since Roethlisberger, but they have a really strong defense, and Lamar is overall a good quarterback in the division, but he does struggle against the Steelers. He's like 2-4 lifetime, and he's been hurt for many of the games, which also isn't great because they're so important. So overall, very disappointing. A game the Ravens should have won, but still very early, so you can't really freak out yet. But huge rivalry loss. Definitely a weird game too. Lots of weird special teams. 2 huge special teams plays that changed it, but yeah, just have to play more disciplined football. Don't make as many mistakes, and they're going to win most of their games if they can just play way more discipline.
Yeah, I'm going to get Arun's thoughts on this Ravens game real quickly and say hi to Arun. Hope that you are doing well today. And then Gil, if you want to turn on your camera and mic, we're going to get Gil's thoughts on the Ravens game too, because we actually have a bunch of people that have seen this game.
Yeah, I thought like the Ravens jumped out to like a great lead, 10-3, but I just think in the fourth quarter things kind of fell apart, giving up 14 points. And yeah, it comes down to just like they need to get, I guess, Zay Flowers, he had 5 receptions, but the next leading receiver other than Mark Andrews is Nelson Aguilar. Odell Beckham, I guess he's been injured most of this year. He only had a couple catches. They did a good job like slowing down the run. Like Najee Harris only had 37 yards, but overall the Ravens, I think even the Texans game they could have won. They could easily be undefeated, but they need to take care of games like this where they can kind of just put away opponents.
I have a question for Tim though, as a Ravens fan. Do you have a concern about Odell Beckham's role in this offense? I mean, he was basically the piece that enticed Lamar Jackson to sign his long-term deal, and he's not really contributing a lot to the offense. Do you have a concern about that?
My main concern is just his health. It's not necessarily his effectiveness on the field, because he's looked pretty good when he's played. It's just he got hurt again this game, so he was out for about half of it and missed a couple games. So he really hasn't played a lot and been productive. I think the good thing when he does play, even though he hasn't had a ton of yards, is he draws a lot of attention. So he opens it up for a lot of other players. And the Ravens have had other receivers hurt, like Bateman. So when you're down one or two guys, the matchups aren't nearly as good, because then you have guys like Zay Flowers probably getting the top one or two corners, and it just cascades from there. So I think just from his reputation, he gets a lot of attention, so they can run plays where he's just kind of like the bait or blocking. But if he can't play, I mean, obviously it's a concern. I don't think that this week's injury was serious. That's the good news, because he came back and he played at the end. I just don't think he has the trust on the field with Lamar quite yet. Again, injuries, because you don't have as many practices as Zay Flowers or Mark Andrews has had, and obviously Andrews, they have the great connection already. So that's one thing. I mean, we'll see. I don't think you can really trust his health, because look at his history, but I'm hoping for the best.
Yeah. Arun just mentioned in chat, because Sportsbot just let us know that the Knicks defeat the Boston Celtics.
Huge win.
Yeah, Knicks beat the Porzingis once again. So that's a good point by Arun. We're joined now by Gil. Gil, how are you doing tonight?
Pretty good. Sorry it's a little late, but yeah, I watched the Ravens game, and I mean, it was a typical start. It went pretty much how I thought it was going to go for the first three quarters. I had it pegged as a very low scoring game. I didn't think the two teams would get past 30 or 35 points is how I had it. And then come the fourth quarter, the wheels fell apart, and I might be alone on this, but I don't think, I mean, the Ravens are going to win a lot of games, but they're not going to go as far as they should until they start shoring up their offensive line, because it just seems to me like every other play, and I know Lamar is built for it, for scrambling and getting away from the coverage and the blitzes, but it seems like every other play the O-line fails, and there's somebody either from all the way in the backfield or in the front seven getting to him, or almost getting to him, or he's hurried or rushed, or and I mean it's become really, really bad and happening way too often for him to be as effective as he ought to be. That's the one thing I've noticed the last couple games, and I get that they're going through the injury bug, but yeah, they're not gonna. they're not going to go all that far until they fix that. In my opinion, you can say, all right, well, injuries to the receiver core, maybe, but their running game is just as strong as it's ever been. But, they got to shore up the O-line somehow, and get Lamar some actual protection for the offense to start clicking. So that's just my take on it.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty astute. It's fun to have you talk football with us. It's I felt like the stars aligned to have you guys be the round table. Unfortunately, Brian has work at 3:00 this morning, so I totally understand that he was unable to give us the Giants' perspective on their losses. But I thought, I never get to talk to Gil about football, and so I thought it'd be interesting to bring him on a little bit early. Before we get too far into the football talk, I do want to talk about one other football, and that's our soccer team. And I was originally going to talk to Brian about that. Oh, Andrea Cannon Guitar, welcome in. You actually now are a sub here, thanks to your sister, who was very generous earlier. I want to thank everyone also for that hype train. That was a great hype train. We had 3 gifted subs and 100 bits, and we're now up to 12 out of the 20 subs. So I really appreciate it, helping me towards my sub goal for this month. Once again, we're trying to get up to 20 subs to unlock all the new animated emotes on the channel. And I really appreciate everyone for being a part of this roundtable and discussing this stuff. And it's been a very lively discussion on Facebook as well, and on Twitch here. So it's great to have all of you guys around. I am going to talk soccer for just a second. So I'm going to turn off this Ravens graphic and turn on the NFL 3 and CNFL 2. All right, so I think that should work. I got too many graphics, but we're trying it out, live editing on in chat. It seems to work pretty well. But anyway, DC United, I just want to give a quick little update to that, and then we'll get back into our football talk and also talk a little bit of some other things as well, including playoff baseball, since I know that Gil and Tim both root for the Orioles, and Arun and I grew up in this area, and Champ is also, I think, pulling for the Orioles. Although Champ, do you watch playoff baseball at all?
I have not watched any of it, but I am trying to keep track of it, just because, again, I did say on last week's podcast I'm rooting for the Orioles, since I was originally an Orioles fan before before Montreal moved down here and became the Nationals. So I do have a vested interest in the Orioles making a run in the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. And let's talk a little bit of soccer for just a second, and then we'll all kind of give our take on the Orioles. So most of the teams play again next week, except for DC United. So there's an odd number of teams in the league right now. So one team doesn't play on the last week. So in fact, this week was our last week. So we had to win both of the games to be able to kind of waited out to see what would happen in the last week. And unfortunately, we didn't do that. On Wednesday, we lost 3-0 to Austin. It kind of sunk our season, unfortunately. We did have another game on Saturday, which we won. We beat New York FC 2-0, which kind of knocked them out of the playoffs. So the table as it currently stands right now is DC United has 40, and the Red Bulls have 40, and the Chicago Fire have 40. But the problem is that we don't own the tiebreakers on them, and they all have one more game on us. So if they tie or win, or even if they lost, unless they lost by like a certain really bad number, I believe all mathematical ways we were eliminated. Even though the 8 versus 9 seed will play for the right to play the number 1 seed. So even though we're sitting at 9 seed and it looks like we're in the playoffs, because we have one less game played, we are actually not going to be in the playoffs this year, which is unfortunate. And so it'll be interesting to see whether the Red Bulls or the Chicago Fire become that last team, and they play against CF Montreal, who also has 41 points. So disappointing, especially because we won the last game, but it wasn't enough. We also got rid of our coach. We mutually parted ways, as they say. It's the second time that we've kind of parted ways with him. Tim, I'll go to you first. What are some of your thoughts on the end of the DC United season?
This franchise lately has really struggled. I would say they haven't made the playoffs a lot recently. I think they missed it 4 straight years, something like that. And the last time they made it, Rooney was a player, and they didn't advance in the playoffs. So since the very beginning of the franchise, when they were really dominant, they haven't been nearly as good, especially in the past 5 or 10 years. And they had a longtime coach before Wayne Olson, and he left, and they just seem to kind of switch directions very often since they had that longtime coach that left. And I don't really think they have a great plan. Rooney gave a lot of energy to the team, and the new stadium is great, but they really need to get a consistent coach and just stick with that person, because they seem to be kind of switching directions too often and not winning games. And Rooney's family didn't like the US or DC, so that was tough. I heard they weren't even here this time because they didn't like it when they had lived here before. So he was here alone, and he might have left at the end of the year anyway. But he needed to make the playoffs, and they didn't. And they're really inconsistent. I think a lot of people assume they have enough talent to make the playoffs. And the thing in the MLS is that I read that's just temporary is 9 teams make the playoffs in a 15-team conference. So you should make the playoffs. You have a 60% chance to make the playoffs. It's not like baseball where like 4 out of 15 teams make it,
Yeah.
So
well, now even more, right? Because now we've got up to 6, I think. So.
6, but this is 9 out of 15.
Yeah, no, it's definitely much more.
And baseball historically is the hardest, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, but I want to speak to it and how close we were, especially with having not playing this last week. The September games, we had 4 draws, 1 win, and a loss. A win in soccer is 3 points. Gil and I talk about wins being 2 points in hockey, but it's 3 points in soccer. So, that's 4 games where potentially, 8 points are left on the table in a game that may have been decided by 1 or 2 points at the end of the season. So you win one of those draw games instead, and you probably make the playoffs.
Frustrating, but that's kind of on the coach a little bit,
Oh, for sure, because it was 0-0 and 1-1. There was 2 0-0 games and 1-1-1 games. So it was all those games. If you just score one more goal in them, or even a goal at all in those games, it's a different game, and it's very frustrating to be that close. We're 10, 10, and 14 on the season, so we're very middling. We're exactly pretty much 500, and so. It's definitely frustrating. Arun, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, it's the 4th season that DC United hasn't made the playoffs, and I guess even though they had 13 more points than last season, it wasn't as they've only won, I think, 1 of their last 13 games. A lot of those have been draws, but and Rooney, I think he just signed to Birmingham City, so I guess he's going back closer to home. I'm not sure if it was mutual or whatever, but I guess DC United still has a long way to go, just getting more talent and finding a new manager.
Yeah. So I'm just looking at it. Basically, we had 1 win in October, 1 win in September, all losses in August. We only had 2 games, 1 win in July, and in June we had 2 wins. So just so many draws and so many missed opportunities, and it's just really frustrating. Champ, any final thoughts on DC United?
I said it last week. I said we needed to win out to have a chance to make the playoffs, and they won 1 out of 2. They needed to beat Austin FC in order to have a chance, and they turned around. They couldn't do it. They ended up winning over New York City FC, but it just wasn't enough. And it was so crazy that literally after the NYCFC game, that the club announced that they and Wayne Rooney had decided to mutually part ways. Wayne Rooney basically became a coach midway through last season, so he had only been there for like a cup of coffee, but obviously they felt like he couldn't get this team to where they needed to be. So now it's all about, it's all about the bounce back. I mean, it's crazy to think that when the MLS was first established way back when, DC United was the standard bearer of this league, and now they're whipping boys for this league for the most part. And they need to get back to where they were when this league was first established, where they won pretty much every MLS Cup to start with. And now their fourth year in a row, they're missing the playoffs. Something's got to give here. They need to find, first and foremost, they got to find a coach that's going to get this team together and get this team firing on all cylinders to get them back to the promised land. That's going to be the first thing. And then be able to cultivate this talent that they have on this roster and being able to go out there on that pitch and play these matches to a T in order to get to where they need to be. But right now, very disappointing result for a franchise that started off as a dynasty and has turned into a disaster.
Yeah, for sure. Gil, I don't know if you follow soccer at the American level, but do you have any final thoughts on the DC United season?
Yeah, I'm the full disclosure, I'm more of an international soccer guy, but I have kind of followed DC soccer a bit from afar. Actually, more the women's game, the Washington Spirit, who look like they're going to kind of eke into their playoffs in the NWSL. But I gotta defer to Tim mostly what he said. DC United, a long, long way from the glory days of when MLS started, the days of Bruce Arena and Marco Echeverri. Nowhere near that caliber for a long time now. And that, Tim's right. It just kind of feels like they're directionless and just kind of need a fresh start. Maybe upper management as well, clean house a little bit there. Maybe it worked in other places. So I think they could use that, but it just doesn't seem like they quite have a plan for the near or long-term future.
Yeah, I just want to give a quick little scoring update. Green Bay just hit a field goal. They now lead the Raiders 13-10 with 5:16 left in the third quarter in that one. And this Dodgers game has been pretty close for the most part. I've been pretty impressed with the Diamondbacks and their play in this series so far. The Diamondbacks actually have 3-0 in the top of the fourth inning here in LA. So it'll be interesting to see if they can go back home to Arizona up 2-0 in their series. So just a little scoring updates and some of those things, but it's an interesting end of the DC United season. It's definitely disappointing for sure. So with that, I'm gonna switch back to I guess let's rip the Band-Aid off, and we're just talking baseball. Let's talk about these Orioles, which were just really disappointing. I really thought that they were going to do a lot better. They obviously had this amazing run, and Tim, I'll let you start since this is your beloved team. There's a rookie who had an amazing season, who had his first terrible game last night in a game that was a must-win situation. I know that there's a great offense here in Texas, but how did they find themselves down 0-2 in this series?
I think probably game one they expected to win, and they should have. And clearly it was a closer game. But if you look at the matchups, because that's important in playoff baseball, and the starters and how you would play out a 5-game series, the Bradish versus Haney starting pitching matchup was probably the best pro Baltimore advantage that they'll get this series. And Bradish pitched pretty well, maybe not quite up to his standard, but the bullpen was great, and they only gave up 3 against that offense. And the Orioles had a ton of guys on base. They just didn't hit with runners on in scoring position. So that is, has been their strength all year. They couldn't do it. I think that game was a lot of nerves. They're very young. The Orioles are young. They have very few players that have ever played in the playoffs before. And a lot of them, like McCann and Gibson and players like that, they're not even playing in that game. So they're just, sitting. I think that was nerves. like you said, game 2, poor start from Grayson Rodriguez. Again, might be nerves, might just be a bad matchup because his worst regular season start was against Texas early in the season. So again, that's tough, but he has been their second best pitcher this season, especially late in the season. So you have to ride the hot guy. I don't really blame them for starting him. We'll see. The Orioles were great on the road, obviously at everywhere to win 101, but I'm not counting them out yet. Obviously, very unlikely that they'll win the series, but it's only 3 games that you'd have to win, have to start with 1. I think they'll play really hard. Interesting story that could go either way, though, is the game 3 starter for Baltimore is Dean Kramer, who's an American-Israeli dual citizen. So he has family in Israel. He lives there part of the year, and he's very emotional right now, obviously. And he was called by the manager Hyde, I believe this morning, and told that he's starting tomorrow night. And he was asked how he feels, and he was like, I'm upset. I'm going to think about it, but I want to play. I want to start. And he pitched some important games. He had a good season, so I'm excited about that. But I think, again, it's, like you said, Robbie, a little risky. Another young pitcher, emotional, no playoff experience to start him. We'll see how it goes. I mean, some guys get extra motivated by things like that, but we'll see. But it's a big storyline.
Yeah, for sure. It's just frustrating because I really, it was such a promising season, and it's not over. I mean, I'll point to the Nationals. They won, a bunch of games on the road, to force a game, 7 in their run, just a couple of years back, for the World Series. So you can go on the road and win, especially against Texas teams, but they're going to have to be able to stifle some of this offensive juggernaut that's happening. I'm going to get Gil's thoughts real quickly on those first 2 games.
Well, yeah, I'm bummed. I'm super disappointed. I can't lie. Had a lot of high hopes, but unfortunately, I think what you're seeing is the lack of. I mean, if you go up and down the Orioles pitching staff, there's a lot of talent there, but there's also a lack of experience. And there's also, I don't know how to explain this, but maybe it's not really that they're as good as they thought they were. I think they relied on the Orioles' knack for coming back in late innings. It kind of saved them. So I don't know. I think unfortunately the Orioles pitching is getting exposed by, one of the most talented offensive teams in both leagues. And I think that's the guts of it. I mean, they battled in the first game. That was great to watch. The second game, they just completely fell apart in all ways. Still showed some grit.
Yeah, I was gonna say they came back towards the tail end at least a little bit. They made it an interesting game, which I was hoping that you got to do that. You got to switch and fight because I think going on the road and just laying out.
And that's for nothing else.
Well,
that's about it.
What I'm hoping is that maybe, since they're down 2-0, it may actually turn out to be a good thing in that, that takes the pressure off of them. Now they're not expected to win. Now they're, okay, even though they finished with the most wins, they probably won't win this series. So maybe with the pressure being off, they win one game, they're back in this series. So I'm kind of hoping for that, but they looked like Tim said, a lot of nerves in the first game, especially. And but they're going to need a lot better, performance from their pitching up and down that order to stay in this series. Hitting also needs to be consistent, but they're getting some timely hits. Gunnar Henderson, love what he's done this whole series. How can you not? But yeah, everybody else, they need to step up a little bit more and Yeah, I think they can find a way, but it starts with the next game, and it's going to be an uphill battle, but it can be done.
Yeah, I will remind everybody that on the 2 championship runs that we have here, the Nationals were behind in theirs, right, in the World Series, but also the Capitals were down 0-2, and lost both of those games at home, and in the first round, in a very similar fashion. So hopefully they can repeat history from 5 years ago and remember that it's not over. You just gotta kind of get it back, the home field advantage. So but all right, I'm gonna get Arun's take real quickly on the Orioles as well.
Yeah, the giving up 11 runs isn't great. I think Baker from the bullpen, lots of Oriole fans have been critical of him coming out of the bullpen and giving up 3 runs and only getting 1 out. That's not great, especially after your starter's given up 5 runs in 1 2/3 innings. And Cedric Mullins, he's struggling. He's only 2 for his last 40 after coming off an injury, so he needs to pick it up. Henderson, he made a great play at the plate. I thought he was going to be out, but he missed the tag and he hit a solo home run. So he's having a really good series. And Aaron Hicks, the former Yankee, he's lighting it up after being waived by the Yankees. Essentially, he hit a critical homer. Well, not critical because the game was out of reach, but at least they gave the Orioles a chance in the bottom of the 9th inning. But it's the Rangers. I guess it's funny. My friend was pointing out the Rangers and the Twins. They're both in the playoffs, and they were the teams that used to be the Washington Senators. So, but I think maybe if the Orioles can win 1 game, maybe they can put the pressure on the Rangers. Like if they have to close out at home at game 4, but first they have to win 1 game, and that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, for sure. Just gonna quickly go. Well, Champ, are you watching any of the playoffs?
Well,
Have you watched?
I do have some thoughts on this, having looked at the stats and everything, and I could just tell that pitching wasn't much of a thing in the first game, but the second game it definitely was something when they put out 8 pitchers for a 9-inning game where they lost by 3 runs. When your starting pitcher doesn't even get out of the second inning, giving up 5 earned runs and only striking out 2 and walking 4, that goes to show you that your pitching is definitely a weak point here. And as a former baseball player myself, as a pitcher as well as an outfielder, one of the most important things when it comes to baseball is pitching. Your pitchers have got to be able to get people out, or be able to have people behind them to be able to get people out. And if your starting pitcher doesn't even get out the second inning in a playoff game, that's a bad sign. That's a bad sign right there. And now you're going to have a starting pitcher that's going to start in game 3, who's got a lot of emotion behind him, being that he has dual citizenship with Israel, and what's going on in Israel right now. He's got a lot on his shoulders, but he's got to be able to take that and be able to put that into what could be the performance of his life, to be able to keep this team alive in their chance to push on in the playoffs. They had the second best record in the major leagues and the best record in the American League. They should absolutely not be ousted out of the playoffs in the first round. So they definitely need to come out in game 3 and really need to show why they made it this far. And if they don't, it's just going to be a big disappointment.
For sure. All right, well, I'm gonna go through the bracket real fast, and just so people know where the standings are for all the games. Again, so Texas up 2-0 over Baltimore, and they play their next game tomorrow at 8:03 p.m. Eastern, and then also tomorrow, game 3 of the Houston Minnesota series, with that one tied at 1, will be at 4:07 in Minnesota. On Wednesday, October 11th, will be the game 3 between Atlanta and Philly. That series is also tied at 1, and that game will be at 5:07. And currently Arizona's up 1-0 in the series over the Dodgers, and that game is still going on right now. There are 2 outs. We're at the bottom of the 4th inning, and Arizona is up 3-0 in this game. So we'll be monitoring baseball maybe towards the end of the podcast. We alluded to it a little bit earlier. The format will be changing next week. Gil and Anna will be joining me at the beginning of the show. We'll have a live Caps game at the 3rd period. So we can watch. I think it'd be kind of a fun way to start the season. Watch live Caps fans fret about the game in real time. I may even try to pause my video feeds, or we might try to sync them up a little bit so that way we're watching at the same time, since I know it's a little delayed. And we'll see what we can do there. We'll start with football. Hopefully we'll have the return of Hertz segment at 9:45, and then at 10 o'clock we'll have Dugenet and the team back. We'll talk a little bit of the Commanders, hopefully a win and a bounce back game against the Atlanta Falcons, and then we'll end it with some basketball talk, and that's going to be my segue right now to Tim and Arun and Champ. This is preseason basketball starting this week. I wanted to get anybody's thoughts who wanted to share them on that. And then after that, I'll let Tim and Arun go, and then I'll get Champ's wrestling thoughts for the week. And then Gil and I will talk hockey to end this show's podcast. But next week, we will end with our Wizards preseason talk and also talk about the results of this baseball series. I know Tim won't be able to join us. He'll be out the next 2 weeks. Yeah, so let me talk to Tim and Arun real quickly about basketball, and get Champ's thoughts on that as well. And then Gil, you and I will talk a little bit of hockey. So we'll start with you, Tim. Do you have any thoughts on the Wizards off-season moves?
Clearly, it's a reset or a rebuild. I think the Wizards brass said they don't like the term rebuild, but it's a rebuild for sure. I saw the Vegas odds for the Wizards wins is, I think, like 25, maybe. It's pretty low, something like that. So the expectations are not for playoffs this year. It's really about seeing some growth from the young guys. They're going to play a lot of rookies and first, second year players, I think. I'm hopeful that they won't be the worst in the East, because they do have some players back, like Kuzma, Denny. So I'm excited to see a couple of those guys get more minutes and see if they can become better, much better players. But it's not going to happen this year for the Wizards. I think it's just about building and possibly, being good in a couple of years from now.
So I'm going to pose to Arun a question that was asked to me a little bit earlier, because there's been so much turnover with the Wizards roster. Arun, can you name the potential 5 starters for the Wizards and 2 people off the bench? Can you name 7 current Wizards players without looking it up?
Jordan Poole, Corey Kispert, Daniel Gafford. Gallinari is going to start over Gafford because Gafford's going to miss the beginning of the year. Kuzma, Wright's going to come off the bench, and the guy Tyus Jones they just acquired in the trade, or I think that's his name.
Nice.
He's starting.
There you go.
Yeah, that's 7.
It's impressive.
And I can name a couple more.
I
Wizards GM probably can't even name that many.
Yeah. So that was good, because I struggled when they said, I was like, oh man, so many people have left. I have to brush up. And but I know Arun, this is why Arun's on the team as our stats guy, because he can name all the Wizards, and I appreciate that. Arun, what are some of your thoughts on the offseason moves?
It's definitely a rebuild. I noticed Bradley Beal, he had 11 points in 13 minutes with the Suns. He's going to have a lot easier time if Durant and Booker and him stay healthy. Porzingis had a highlight dunk crossing over somebody. So everyone who was good on the Wizards has moved on to probably championship contention. And the Wizards, their big two is Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma, so they're calling them Kuzma. So let's get, maybe they can be a great duo. I guess if Poole was a really good player for the Warriors, but ever since Draymond punched him in the face, he's kind of like been I don't know, like he's been playing well, but not as well as he used to. And Iguodala said like on a podcast that he falls over on defense on purpose, and that's like giving more energy than actually playing good defense. Hopefully Wes Unseld Jr. can fix that. And yeah, there's some pieces, but I think there's one fan who's angry that the Wizards had a fashion show last week. I don't really think this team, even if they like were in a prisoners camp, they wouldn't be making the playoffs. Hopefully, I don't think they. Maybe they can make the playoffs, but I just don't think doing a fashion show is a reason for a distraction for this team. And it's just preseason, and I think they need to bond. There's basically, as you mentioned, there are a lot of new faces, and it's probably just more of a team building activity. So lighten up, Wizards Twitter, and enjoy the ride.
Yeah, it's I appreciate that you and Gil still call it Twitter. I still don't know what to do because for my work I have to still post to it, and I still post a little bit on it. I just I hate calling it X.
I still call it Twitter. Fuck that. I still call it Twitter.
Oh yeah.
I think we're just all just gonna continue to call it Twitter and say screw it. But yeah, it's been. Yeah, it'll be an interesting year for the Wizards. One thing that I thought was fascinating this season, they've scheduled a Monday game almost every week. So Gil and I got a live game for hockey next week, but I think there's only 3 or maybe 4 Monday hockey games all season, Gil. Well, meanwhile, the Wizards seem to have 3 or 4 every month. And so there's gonna be a lot of post-game lives for us to dissect on the Wizards Roundtable this year on Monday nights, which I thought was just interesting. I guess because Monumental Sports now owns everything, the sports and the sport itself and the broadcast partner, they could just be like, we'll just always do Wizards on Monday. And I just thought that was fascinating. So there'll be a lot of post games and a lot of scoring updates throughout the games that we'll be doing as well. I want to get Champ's quick thoughts on the Wizards, and then I want to get a final NFL thought from each of Tim and Arun before I let them go. But Champ, any thoughts on the Wizards going into this season?
This is definitely a rebuild season. This is going to be the first season that we won't have Bradley Beal on the roster. And looking at the roster, there's a lot of unfamiliar faces that I see here. The only familiar faces that I see on here that were on here previously were guys like DeLon Wright, Denny Avdia, Daniel Gafford, Corey Kispert, Kyle Kuzma. So it's going to be a lot of unfamiliar faces. It's definitely, again, a rebuild season for this Wizards team. Even if the front office doesn't want to admit to that, they need to understand that this is what it is, honestly. If this team somehow makes the playoffs with this roster, I'll be shocked. I'll be definitely shocked, but I have very low expectations for the season, given the fact that we lost a lot of pieces this offseason, including who was our franchise player in Bradley Beal. So I have low expectations. That's all I can say is I have low expectations.
So if the roster is terrible and the coach, there's a lot of question marks over, what are we evaluating? What are the goals? What should we need to do to keep this coach and keep moving in the current trajectory? I'll start off with you, Champ.
I think that one of the things is that this coaching staff needs to definitely have a sound game plan every game, including defensively. Like they have to be very sound, and they have to be able to score on the offensive side. I think that's the main thing, because I preach this for as long as I've been a part of the Wizards Roundtable. I preach that this team needs to play defense, and a lot of times they do, a lot of times they don't. but they have to consistently be a very sound defensive team, and they have to be able to turn defense into offense in order to be successful. The East is not a very tough division. It's not a very tough conference. If we were in the Western Conference, I would say we would be dead last every time, but we're in the Eastern Conference, so we have a chance. But we have to be able to put everything together and be able to have the pieces together in order to be successful in what is not an extremely strong conference as opposed to the Western Conference. So I think that's what needs to happen with this coaching staff. They need to be able to find the right pieces, the right combinations in terms of the backcourt and the front court to be able to be successful both on the defensive side of the ball as well as on the offensive side of the ball. They have to be able to do that. Otherwise, they're going to most likely be dead last in the Eastern Conference and be the laughingstock of the NBA.
But you think the coach is on the hot seat, though?
I think he is. I think this. Honestly, it's hard to say he's going to be on the hot seat given the fact that this is basically a rebuild. Like they're basically building up from the ground up here. So I don't know if you put the coach on the hot seat, but most likely because this is DC and they tend to want to have coaches' heads on stakes, he's most likely on the hot seat, which is unfair given the fact that he's basically going to has a rebuilt roster to work with coming off of another failed season. So they need to the coaches need to really step it up if they want to save their jobs.
Yeah. Arun, what are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, they did pick up his fourth year option, so they don't really plan to fire him immediately. It sounds like October 2nd that happened. So I don't think it really matters who the head coach is over even like this year. And I think he's just going to be judged on development, like Jordan Poole, if he gets back to form, or if Denny finally picks it up. Johnny Davis proves he's like a rotation player. Corey Kispert becomes like a viable starter, like caliber player in this league. I think if Kyle Kuzma, if he like makes a leap and he becomes like a top 30 or maybe like a top 30 player, then Wes Unseld Jr. has done his job. But there's a roadmap because 10 teams technically make the playoffs. There's a roadmap they could make the playoffs, but my expectations are very low for this season, and they're rebuilding. And frankly, they might trade away like guys like DeLon Wright if they get like a good package. But they're definitely a deep team. They just don't have like a real stud on this team. That's for sure.
Yeah. Tim, what are your thoughts on the coaching situation and the team going into this year?
Yeah, I agree with Arun. I mean, you don't pick up the option if you're not planning to keep him for this entire season, and the expectations are very low. I think it's more about, like Champ said, defense is effort mostly, so they can control that. They're not going to score as much as a lot of teams because they don't have, stars. They do have guys that can score, but they have no star. They're not going to have any all-stars most likely. So they do need to play really well on defense to keep up at all. I just think in today's NBA, especially in DC, you can't rely on free agency at all. So the Wizards are going to have to draft another Beal type player or even better to really have a chance to be a playoff contender. And, some people think Koulibaly could be that eventually, but it sounds like he's more of a project and he's not going to be ready for, years, but he might be eventually like an all-star type player. So how he develops and all the young players is more important than wins and losses. But if it looks like he maybe is a bust like Johnny Davis might be, then that's not going to help Unseld. I mean, it's not like he drafted him, but he needs to develop these players more, and he can play them now because he doesn't need to worry about getting like the 10th seed and keeping Beal happy. So there's some freedom like playing these young guys, even if you lose.
And who knows, maybe the young guys all gel together and they form a cohesion that we're not foreseeing, just because they were unknown and they were underperforming in other situations. Maybe they'll get more playing time. We've seen it before where, some unknown person, in the right fit and the right system, excels. So, we can hope for that as well. I want to get one last thought from each one of you guys. I'm going to start off with Tim and then I'm going to let you go. But Tim, is there any other thoughts in the world of sports, the NFL, or anything in general that you wanted to talk about before we let you go?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked a lot. It's been a great show. I have said nothing positive the entire time. We've only said this team lost, this team lost, this team fired a coach, this team will fire a coach. So I'm going to end a little bit positive and just say F the Cowboys. You got stopped. I didn't watch it, but it was great. Everybody at my job that likes them is just very quiet today. No chat. So that's my one win. I'm going to end on a positive note.
And the Giants lost too. So like the Commanders did
too.
fall one game behind the Eagles, and the Eagles almost lost their game. So, I wish that they had, because, people talk about, oh, you lost to the Bears, but you have to look at it situationally week to week. If everyone loses that week, then you're not actually going that far backwards. So, hopefully we can find a rebound. I hope that you guys find a way to rebound in London this week. I know we're not going to see you for a couple weeks on the show. I hope that you have a good trip, and we'll definitely catch you right as the NBA season is coming back into the swing of things. But I really appreciate Tim.
Yeah, definitely.
Always. I'm sorry that your teams didn't do better. I'm sorry that we had to cover it.
No problem.
But I appreciate your friendship and coming on as always, and we'll talk to you soon.
Definitely. Have a good one, guys.
Safe travels, Tim.
Thanks.
All right, Arun, final thoughts from you on any of the sports we've talked about or anything that we may have missed?
Nothing really comes to mind. Just the Commanders take care of business next time against the worst team in the NFL and don't give up more points. I think they gave up, it might have been less, but it felt like the Bears had more points in that game than they did the entire season, even though I know they had like a lot of points against the Broncos, but was still pretty disappointing. So it wasn't like they kind of just didn't have their eye on the ball. And Magic Johnson with the obvious statement, they didn't come out with any intensity. So thanks, Magic.
Well, it's just so interesting to me, the intensity thing. I couldn't believe how flat they seemed. And then in the second half, they showed the intensity that I wanted for the whole game, but it's too little too late. But they still almost climbed their way back in it. And they gave me that false hope, which I always hate. Like, I almost wish it had not gotten that close, because oh, maybe are they going to do it? Do I care now? And I just kind of wish I had turned the channel. But very frustrating loss. But Arun, I'm excited to have you come on next week, hopefully to talk a little bit of some preseason basketball at the end of the show, if you're available. But I always love your insight on all sports. I appreciate your time as always, and hope that you have a good week.
Sure. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Champ, we're going to switch gears. I'm going to get your quick top 2 wrestling stories of the week. And I'm going to throw up the no spots graphic. Let people know. I know that there was a big pay-per-view this week, but let us know the big storylines from that and what we could find out either on last week's show or this upcoming week's show, whatever you want to shout out.
Well, the wrestling world is still talking about Adam Copeland, aka Edge, the WWE Hall of Famer, jumping to AEW. He has his debut match coming up on Tuesday night against Luchasaurus on what's being titled as Title Tuesday for AEW Dynamite, which is going head to head with this week's episode of NXT, which is boasting having appearances by Asuka, who's a former NXT Women's Champion, John Cena, Paul Heyman, and Cody Rhodes. So WWE is really stacking up NXT to go up against AEW, who's got Adam Copeland debuting on that show as well. So the ratings should be very interesting on a Tuesday night, but that's a big win for wrestling fans to have 2 shows on that night that are completely stacked. The other big story was that FTR, who were the AEW World Tag Team Champions, lost their titles Saturday night to the team of Ricky Starks and Big Bill, and then there was speculation that they were done with AEW, despite the fact they signed new 4-year contracts earlier this year, based on a tweet that Dax Harwood put out, but he clarified that they're not going anywhere, but that the title change happened because of a legit injury that happened to Cash Willie. He injured his rib, so I guess they needed some time off and things like that. So those are some of the main stories. The other big story is that the main event for the upcoming Wrestle Kingdom 18 event taking place in the Tokyo Dome on January the 4th, 2024 has been set Sonata successfully defended his World Heavyweight Championship earlier on Monday against Evil, and he will be facing his former stablemate Tetsuya Naito in the main event after Tetsuya Naito won the G1 Climax tournament this year. So that's another big thing here on a show which was Destruction in Ryogoku, which saw not only the World Championship retained, but also saw a new strong openweight champion, tag team champions crown in Hikuleo and El Phantasmo, and a couple other championships retained. There's scheduled to be a press conference that's going to be taking place early Tuesday morning here in the United States, which will be a follow-up to that event. But coming up this week on the No Spots podcast, we'll be back on our regularly scheduled day and time of Sunday after football at 7 p.m., where we are going to recap this past weekend's Fastlane pay-per-view, which saw new undisputed WWE Tag Team Champions crowned in Cody Rhodes and Jey Uso. That was the only championship that changed hands on the night. So we're going to recap that, and we're going to look at all the fallout from that event, as well as continue build towards Bound for Glory on Impact, and continue build towards Full Gear on AEW television, on AEW programming as well. So make sure you check us out Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern, twitch.tv/true no spots pod. And you can listen to the audio the very next day on Spotify as well as Amazon Music.
Yeah, definitely. If anyone wants any of the links, sportsothp.com. Click the podcast partners button, and you can get the No Spots podcast and Gil's Power Play Point podcast. Links to both of those are there. And I'm going to be shortly adding Dujanay's new podcast there. You can catch his old one still on the link, but his new one's been linked in the Facebook. I updated the description for that, and also will be on all the YouTube links as well. But Champ, thank you so much for co-hosting all night, talking a wide variety of sports with me. We'll be back next week when have you on maybe it's with Hurt at the 9:45 segment, but if not that, at the 10 o'clock for sure, talking Commanders and Wizards and hopefully Orioles, but we'll see how they do with all that. And I appreciate you rocking the merch as always. If anyone wants to pick up any of the merch that I'm wearing or that Champ is wearing, you can also go to sportsothp.com and click our podcast merch button over there. But Champ, everyone check it out, the No Spots podcast. It's a great show. I love listening to it. I get all my wrestling news. I don't get to catch all the shows throughout the week, but it's a great way to recap all of that. And Champ, thank you for being a part of the True Radio Network with us for now over 6 seasons, I think, right? Yeah. So appreciate it as always, and we'll talk to you next week.
Okigenyo, sayonara.
All right. So with that, we're going to take the No Spots graphic off on Twitch. We're going to